They expected someone younger, someone more naive. When the shuttle doors hissed open and Ambassador Yelena Gray stepped onto the marbled platform of Samatra, the assembly of alien diplomats registered collective surprise. Her boots clicked softly against the glass-polished stone, an old Earth style, sturdy, worn, distinctly ungalactic. She walked like a woman who'd never been hurried a day in her life. Her silver braid fell over one shoulder, the threads of it catching the artificial sunlight, swaying like a rope she could use to pull a star down if she chose. She wore no weapon, not visibly, only the ink swirling from her collarbone up the right side of her neck, a strange black coil of runes and birds' wings, ancient-looking, alive in ways that made the Axery delegates lean away as she passed. No one mentioned the tattoo, at first. Not aloud, but they whispered. That's what they were now, sneered the reptilian Galthrith envoy under his breath, flicking his tongue as if tasting her scent. Humans are still such primitives, said the amphibious Lurani attaché, hiding her mouth behind translucent fingers. Only one said nothing at all, a younger diplomat, barely an adult by their species standards. He stared at the tattoo like it meant something. Something dangerous. Yelena offered a smile as she passed each of them, all warmth and grandmotherly charm, and bowed, not too deeply. Just enough to register politeness. Just enough to remain unthreatening. It was an old Terran trick. Smile wide, bare no teeth. Not yet. The Grand Rotunda was circular, fragrant with pollen from floating biospheres imported from 6 different worlds. Ornamental koi from Earth's vanished rivers swam in levitating aquariums. Everything shimmered, crystal, silk, water, light. Ambassador Gray, called a voice like cracked glass. High Chancellor Rickthal of the Axery Council approached in ceremonial robes made of metallic scales. Your reputation precedes you. But I confess I expected something different. Yelena inclined her head. I hear that often. Most expect more metal. Or perhaps more menace. The High Chancellor's smile froze. Around them, other envoys chuckled, some nervously. We heard tales of Earth's tooth and claw, Rickthal said. Instead, we find a woman with a walking cane and a tattoo. She smiled wider. Appearances deceive. Earth sends diplomats, not brutes. And the cane. She tapped it once on the floor. An old habit, not a need. When she took her place at the long table, her seat was at the far end. An intentional gesture. A reminder from the Council that Earth was still an observer species, curious, uncivilized, and likely disposable. The talks began. The subject was interstellar trade and the recent skirmishes on the Tova border, which the humans insisted were defensive gestures, and the Axery described as barbaric lunges. The room buzzed with tension dressed in silken civility. Yelena spoke little, nodding thoughtfully, her gnarled fingers tracing the stem of her teacup. A few times, she raised a question so softly the microphone almost didn't catch it. How many colonies do the Lurani now maintain beyond the Cyric Gate? Has there been resolution over the mining rights on Nenthos 4? Is it true the Axery are reinforcing the outer stations with quantum shields? Innocent, curious questions. Harmless, really. Yet with each one, alien advisors stiffened. Files were rechecked. Whispered corrections were offered. Somehow, she knew things she shouldn't. Small things. Uneasily precise. At the evening reception, the wine shimmered and shifted color according to palate preferences. The air buzzed with cross-species small talk. Someone played an instrument that sounded like dripping icicles. Someone else laughed too hard at a mistranslated joke. Yelena stood alone beside a cascading pool, watching bioluminescent fish blink beneath its surface. The same younger diplomat from before approached her, an avian species with wide, intelligent eyes and feathers that shifted with emotion. Your tattoo, he said after a respectful silence. It is not merely ornamental. She smiled again. On Earth, we mark our dead with ink. Stories etched into skin so we don't forget who we carry. The young alien tilted his head. And this one? Ah, she said. This one is old. It's a warning. He looked puzzled. She sipped her drink. Do you know of Baba Yaga? She asked, conversational. He shook his head. A witch from old Earth stories. Lived in a house with chicken legs. 8 liars. Advised kings. Very temperamental. She paused. They say if you see her tattoo, you've already been cursed. He blinked twice, unsure if she was joking. Her smile didn't help. Later that night, at the formal banquet, the High Chancellor proposed a toast. Everyone raised glasses. He turned to Yelena. I believe it is customary on Earth to honor warriors with marks, yes? He gestured to her neck. Tell us, what beast did you slay to earn yours? The laughter that followed was polite, but sharp. Yelena set her glass down carefully. Where I come from, we mark the ones who survive. Rickthal leaned forward. Of course. And what did you survive, Ambassador? She locked eyes with him. Humanity. The silence came like a curtain dropping. Someone coughed. The High Chancellor laughed awkwardly and waved it off. A fine jest. Yelena returned to her drink. She didn't laugh. The following morning, the skies above Samatra flickered with distant lightning, though there were no clouds. One of the outer orbit patrols reported a strange energy fluctuation near the human delegation's cruiser, only for the readings to vanish a moment later. Technical glitch, said the Axery technician. Sensor ghost. But the technician filed a report anyway. Yelena spent that morning strolling the botanical quadrants alone. Wherever she walked, vines leaned toward her. Wind chimes tuned themselves to some inaudible pitch. One alien groundskeeper claimed he saw her shadow split briefly into 3. Of course, no one believed him. In the council chamber, another round of deliberations began. Yelena arrived late. She apologized with a genuine seeming smile. My crew misplaced my tea, and I can't possibly negotiate without it. You understand. The session resumed. She said little again, only offering one line mid-speech that rippled through the chamber like a tremor. You know, she said lightly, on Earth we never had the largest guns, but we got very good at aiming. Later, when a member of the Lurani delegation was found in their quarters, babbling about shadows whispering through the walls, it was dismissed as hallucination caused by alien alcohols. The diplomat was sedated, quietly removed. Meanwhile, the tattoo became the subject of betting among aides and junior staff. Some claimed it was reactive tech, others insisted it was a religious symbol. A few joked that it might even be Earth's secret weapon, branding their diplomats like threats instead of symbols of peace. One particularly daring aide snapped a photo while she slept beneath a greenhouse tree. The tattoo in the image was different. It had shifted slightly. One of the wings had grown a new line. Another aide swore it blinked at her. She deleted the photo, but not before copying it to her private drive. By the end of the week, most alien leaders regarded Yelena with a mix of confusion and veiled concern. They laughed less, spoke less freely in front of her. Sometimes she'd pass 2 envoys whispering and say, "Don't let me interrupt," and both would freeze as if caught trespassing in a war zone. One night, the young feathered diplomat returned, this time with a question. Why did Earth send you specifically? Yelena looked at him long and soft, as if peering back through centuries of blood and smoke. Because I'm the kind of polite they understand, and the kind of quiet they fear. A pause. They, he asked. All of you, she said gently. Every species that ever thought humanity smiled too wide. The next day, a delegation from the Samari, who had until now ignored Earth's presence, requested a closed-door meeting with her. No transcript was kept, only the fact that they emerged visibly shaken, and that 2 of them began wearing silk scarves that obscured their necks. When Rickthal learned of it, he called for a formal hearing. It was time, he said, to determine whether Earth's representative was truly a diplomat, or something more dangerous. Yelena arrived early that morning. Waiting already in her seat, cane across her knees. As they filed in, each alien glanced toward the tattoo. By now, it had become a presence of its own. Rickthal stood at the center, flanked by guards. Ambassador, he began. We have observed anomalies, disappearances, strange behavior from our own delegates. We've seen you manipulate without force, influence without threat. And always that mark. Yelena raised her brows. You fear a tattoo? We fear what lies beneath it. She set her cane aside and stood. My people learned long ago that strength doesn't come from what you carry, but from what you hide. You all brought ships, armor, weaponry. She touched the ink skin lightly. We brought memory. The room stilled. You mock what you don't understand, she continued. But humanity didn't survive our darkness by accident. We embraced it. We outlived it. We etched it into our bones and called it wisdom. Silence. Then her voice softened. Baba Yaga, they used to say, lived on the edge of the forest. Not because she was afraid of the world, but because the world was afraid of her. She stepped closer to the Chancellor. And what grows at the edge of your galaxy, Chancellor? He didn't answer. She smiled. You invited me here to talk peace. Perhaps that's what I offered. But if what you wanted was reassurance, well, you invited the wrong grandmother. She turned and walked out, leaving silence, and the echo of her cane behind. Behind her, the younger diplomat whispered something in his native tongue. The translator stammered, then finally said aloud, She is not a diplomat. She is a threshold. And across Samitra, no one laughed at her tattoo again. The moon garden glowed with cultivated serenity, its soft lavender skies arching over transparent domes that filtered light from the gas giant overhead. Every vine, every stone, every ambient chime had been engineered to communicate sophistication, peace, and most of all, control. But the garden could not quite account for Ambassador Yelena Gray. Her presence had begun to fray the controlled rhythm of the diplomatic ecosystem. One by one, the alien delegates were discovering that the human diplomat, smiling, silver-haired, full of parables and peculiar old customs, was no mere envoy. And her tattoo had ceased being a curiosity. It was now a whisper, a symbol, a question. That morning, the High Chancellor met with his war council in a sound-sealed chamber carved into the roots of Samitra. What had started as routine negotiations had shifted into something they couldn't quantify. Delegates were distracted, reports unreliable. The Samari had withdrawn unexpectedly. The Lurani were requesting personal guards. She hasn't threatened anyone directly, Rickthal said, exasperated. No overt weapons. No illegal technology. And yet the entire summit bends around her like she's a black hole wrapped in lace. She speaks as if everything is a memory, hissed the Galthrith intelligence minister. But she's predicting us, correcting our data. She knows things. Rickthal rubbed the ridge above his eyes. So what is she? The room fell silent. No one had an answer. Yelena, meanwhile, was having tea with a stone-faced security officer from her own delegation. His name was Halloran, ex-military. One eye replaced with a polished optic lens, his posture too perfect for diplomacy. She's got them dancing on eggshells, he muttered, watching a bird-like envoy trip over their own feet, trying to avoid Yelena's path. Are you watching their frequencies? She asked, stirring her tea. Body language? Breath tempo? Yes. Fear metrics rising across all species except the Samari. She took a slow sip. The Samari are already ours. They're just too proud to say it. And the rest? We'll bake them in their own silence. Let them squirm under the weight of a smile. They'll show their hands soon enough. Halloran looked toward the main rotunda. Permission to posture? She smiled. Granted. But wear a flower. Makes it worse. He sighed and tucked a ridiculous coral blossom behind his ear. It clashed absurdly with his scarred jaw. Then he walked into the council floor like a man stretching before a knife fight. Within an hour, Rickthal was informed the human security officer had just outmaneuvered 3 rival factions into agreeing to a surveillance-sharing compact, without a single formal vote. It was technically legal. Infuriatingly so. Yelena spent the afternoon baking. She commandeered a diplomatic kitchen, a rarely used relic of interspecies hospitality, and spent 4 hours making what she called witch cakes. She claimed it was tradition on Earth to share sweets when tensions rose. The scent of cinnamon and roasted flour drifted through the corridors, weaving into the minds of diplomats like a lullaby. Some accepted the offering out of curiosity. Some refused. One collapsed in tears after a single bite, citing an overwhelming memory of home he couldn't explain. By evening, the Lurani ambassador, who had once laughed at her tattoo, requested a private word. "I wish to apologize," she said softly, gill plates fluttering. "I misjudged Earth. You are not what we assumed." Yelena looked at her with that same ageless patience. "What did you assume? That you were children." And now, the Lurani looked away. Children do not teach monsters to dream. The next morning, the council convened for a closed review. Unofficially, it was being called the Yelena problem. "She isn't violating protocol," muttered the Galactic diplomat, scratching at scales that had recently begun to flake from stress. "But she is eroding us, like water through stone. She hasn't asked for anything." Rickthal barked. "That's the worst part. She's just here, being unsettling." "She planted fear without speaking it aloud," said the Lurani ambassador, now seated farther from the others than usual. "She weaponized memory. I tasted grief in her pastries. That is not normal." "It's human," said the Samari observer suddenly. All heads turned. "I've studied them longer than most," he went on. "They are not built like us. They carry things in story and symbol. The old ones, the ones like her, they bleed meaning. They fight with myth. And if you don't believe the myth, they make you part of it." Rickthal shook his head. "Then we call her bluff." Later that day, Yelena was summoned to an honor ceremony, hosted in the southern amphitheater of Samitra. It was, in truth, a trap, an attempt to subtly probe her limits under pressure. Security protocols were doubled. Energy scanners recalibrated. Questions would be asked under the guise of ritual. She accepted with grace. When she arrived, she wore a robe of soft linen patterned with ancient Earth constellations. Her cane was gone, her tattoo visible in full now, black wings stretching like shadows across her throat. The amphitheater was filled with watchers pretending to be celebrants. Yelena smiled and nodded to each, as if they were old friends. Rickthal approached with a ceremonial blade, tradition, he claimed. It would be presented and returned, symbolizing mutual vulnerability. But when he held it out, she didn't take it. She leaned in, eyes soft as dusk. "Would you like to see what I brought instead?" He hesitated. "Your cane, perhaps." "No, that was for walking." She stepped forward. "This is for remembering." She turned slightly, revealing the tattoo now pulsing faintly, a dim bioluminescent glow crawling along its lines. The room dimmed. No switch had been touched. The hum began, subaudible, a frequency felt in the marrow. Several delegates stiffened. One dropped a glass. Another took a sudden, terrified step backward. "It's a resonance key," said the Samari observer aloud. "Her skin carries an ancient Terran interface. Psychological induction, broadcast fear, amplify memory, override logic." "Impossible," Rickthal whispered. "That kind of weapon was banned 100 years ago." "Unless it isn't a weapon," said the Lurani, voice brittle. "Unless it's just them." Yelena's voice sliced through the air like a lullaby turned funeral march. "We didn't make monsters, Chancellor. We remembered them. We kept them alive. You thought our ink was decoration. It is scripture." One of the guards fainted. Another fell to his knees. "You came here to probe Earth's strength," she said, stepping up onto the ceremonial dais. "But strength isn't how loud your voice is, or how sharp your teeth. It's what you do in silence. It's the story they whisper about you when they think you're dead." "I will not be intimidated by a woman with a bedtime story," Rickthal snapped. Yelena leaned forward. "That's not a bedtime story. That's a prophecy." And the lights went out. A plan test, triggered by Rickthal's own people to stress test her reactions, backfired catastrophically. The moment darkness fell, half the delegates panicked. The hum of her tattoo surged. Shapes flickered at the edges of vision. Several claimed to hear voices calling to them in their native tongues, dead relatives, old enemies, lost children. When the lights returned 12 seconds later, 6 delegates had collapsed. 2 refused to open their eyes, and Rickthal's ceremonial blade was missing. It was in Yelena's hands. She spun it lightly, then set it down on the floor. "Well," she said, voice as cheerful as a hostess at a garden party. That was illuminating. She walked out without another word. The next morning, the Galthrith delegation demanded reassignment to another summit. The Lurani removed their ambassador from service, citing stress contamination. And the Samari released an internal memo declaring formal alliance talks with Earth. Rick Thull paced his office, watching recordings of Yelena over and over. "She doesn't move like a warrior," he muttered. "She doesn't carry weapons. She doesn't issue threats. She tells stories. She makes tea. And yet she's terrifying." "She's human," the intelligence minister whispered. "A very old one." In her quarters, Yelena reviewed a dossier transmitted through a secure channel. Halloran stood nearby, watching her mark names with a small quill dipped in nothing. "The council will meet again tomorrow," he said. "Want me to leak your attendance?" "No," she tapped one name. "Leak his attendance. And tell the Samari that the storm from our orbit should last exactly 9 minutes. They'll understand that, if they've been paying attention. Which they have. They've started using old Earth parables in council notes." She smiled. "We're contagious." The younger diplomat from before visited again. His feathers were duller now, his posture more formal. "I read more about Baba Yaga," he said. "Oh, she eats people." Yelena laughed. "Only the ones who lie to her. She tests them. She gives them a chance." "Exactly." He hesitated. "And if they pass, she lets them go. Changed, but intact. She respects courage." He nodded. "I think I understand. You are here to test us." "No," she leaned in. "I am here to see if you're ready for the stories we haven't told yet." He swallowed. "And if we're not?" Her voice was velvet over steel. "Then we will become your story." The next day, a statue was quietly unveiled in the northern garden. A new piece of abstract sculpture commissioned by an anonymous delegate. It resembled a house with strange legs, crouching on the edge of a forest no longer found in any known database. Beneath it, a plaque. "Some warnings are not threats. They are invitations to listen carefully." By now, even the smallest aides avoided eye contact with Yelena's tattoo. The council met one final time before the closing of the summit. All formalities were followed, but no one challenged her presence again. Instead, Rick Thull addressed the chamber with careful neutrality. "We welcome our Terran allies into the Greater Council," he said. "And we thank Ambassador Gray for her insight." She rose, bowed exactly as before, just polite enough. As she turned to leave, the High Chancellor called after her. "What is your tattoo's true name?" She paused. Then, without turning, she said, "It's the shape of your fear when it finally learns to kneel." She walked out into the starlight, where her ship waited, and where the wind smelled faintly of cinnamon. And above the planet, in the vast, watching dark, other ships began to move. The artificial sun had not risen when the plan to remove Yelena Gray was finalized. It had no formal name, just a collection of nods, encrypted transmissions, and old enemies finally agreeing on one truth. Something had to be done. She was not a warrior, not visibly, but she had tilted the room without lifting a weapon, disrupted decades of balance with a pastry recipe, turned negotiations into performances where the other actors didn't know the script. And worse, she hadn't demanded anything. She simply watched, asked polite questions, breathed like a ghost too, respectful to haunt you directly. The decision came as an act of self-preservation, not vengeance. The operation was meant to be clean. No spectacle. A diplomatic reassignment. A containment. They would redirect her shuttle mid-transit under the guise of a hull irregularity. Her entourage would be detained. A formal inquiry would follow, full of carefully worded accusations and endless procedural tangles. It would end with her removal from the summit and, ideally, her quiet disappearance from galactic discourse. It began on the third day after the statue appeared. Yelena had just finished a solo walk through the eastern arboretum. The paths were thick with mist that clung low, curling around her feet like curious animals. She walked slowly, speaking softly into a device no one could identify. Not recording, not transmitting, just speaking. as if someone was listening from very far away. She stopped when she reached a broken sculpture of an alien child mid-flight. It had been shattered during a previous summit. Most ignore it. Yelena knelt. She brushed the moss from its face. Spoke a single word. Still. Later, when she returned to her quarters, a ceremonial notice was waiting for her. An invitation, an honor rarely extended to humans. A closed ritual chamber, high above Sametra's equator, where only species of proven moral legacy were welcome. The ceremony was supposedly a gesture of trust, a recognition of her cultural contributions. She accepted without question. The chamber was a cathedral of silence, long arches built from reflective or light bending in uncertain angles. 6 delegates from separate species waited in robes designed to equalize stature. Obscure distinction. It was intended to disarm, to reduce threat. But Yelena entered like she'd seen the ending of a play before the curtains had ever risen. She did not wear formal Terran robes. Instead, she arrived in a long black coat that whispered when she moved. The tattoo on her throat was uncovered, vibrant in low light. Its lines shifted again. More now, somehow. It seemed to breathe. Rickthal, leading the circle, raised his hands. "We convene in the name of balance," he said. "To preserve the peace we have all labored to construct." "Peace built on misunderstanding is brittle," Yelena replied. "This is not a trial," another voice added, feathered and tremulous. "No," she said softly. "It's a test." There was a pause. Not quite hesitation. Something else. Dread, perhaps, dressed in diplomacy. "Then let us begin," said Rickthal. "Please, Ambassador, join the center." She stepped forward, unarmed, unhurried. Sensors tracked her vitals. Scans swept her body. No illegal implants. No concealed weapons. But the tattoo defied all classification. It emitted no power signature, and yet it resonated across multiple spectrums. Several instruments registered mild interference. One console shorted. Another recorded a 5-second loop of a child's voice singing in a dialect no one recognized. "Your people have sent envoys before," Rickthal said, voice like a judge. "Yet none so singular." "They sent me because peace is fragile," she said. "And I am very good with fragile things. You destabilized the summit. I revealed its balance was false. You disrupted 3 trade agreements for defense pacts and unified the Samari against their own interests. I offered nothing but conversation. You weaponized myth." She smiled. "All stories are weapons, Chancellor. Some merely wait for the right reader." A moment of silence. Then came the final question, carefully rehearsed, sanctioned by every faction present. "Ambassador Gray," Rickthal said, voice steady. "Are you acting alone?" She looked at him with a gentleness that stilled the air. "No human ever acts alone. We carry our dead with us, our children, our monsters. We walk into rooms with 10,000 voices behind our eyes. I stand here with the weight of centuries. And I smile because you think that makes me polite." With that, the tattoo flared. Not violently, not theatrically, but profoundly. Each alien in the chamber flinched as sound fell away. Even the subtle hum of the station's life support dimmed. The air tasted of smoke and old earth. The floor shifted, though it didn't move. One delegate clutched their chest. Another dropped their notes, blinking rapidly. "What is this?" Rickthal whispered. "A key," Yelena said. Turned gently. One of the delegates fell to their knees, breath ragged. "She's inside my thoughts." "No," Yelena corrected kindly. "You're inside mine." The tattoo, now unmistakably alive with layered patterning, was activating a Terran-designed psychic interface, long rumored but never proven. It did not read thoughts, it shaped them. A weaponless invasion. A whisper that reshaped perception without violence. "You think we were the ones learning from you," she said. "But you forgot how quickly a frightened creature adapts. How quiet desperation becomes strategy. What do you want from us?" Rickthal rasped. "I want nothing," she said. "Humanity already has what it came for." "What is that?" "The future." With those words, the resonance pulse deepened. Memory was rewritten. Small details shifted. Delegates found themselves uncertain what time it was, what had been said, who had initiated which treaties. The chamber was unmarked by energy signatures, and yet several left with mild nosebleeds, blacked-out vision, tremors in their limbs. Yelena bowed. "You sought to remove me," she said. "But Earth never sends anyone they can afford to lose." She turned and left. Halloran was waiting. "They tried to trap you. I know. They underestimated you. They always do." He handed her a slate. She reviewed it quickly. "We have confirmation," he said. "The Lurani have recalled their fleet. The Galthrith are requesting Terran diplomatic protection. The Samari sent flowers." "Which kind?" "Night thorns." She smiled. That night, she hosted a formal Terran dinner in her quarters. Invitations were sent to every delegate, coded, symbolic, curated for effect. Each envelope bore a different phrase in Old Earth tongue. "Speak softly. The wolf is watching. Beware the house that walks." Only 7 delegates came. She served stew, told stories, asked no questions. One delegate wept during dessert. No recordings were made. But what was said at that table spread faster than any broadcast. The next day, Rickthal ordered an emergency security sweep of all Terran technology on Samitra. They found nothing illegal. But 5 of the scan operators submitted for early medical leave, citing existential disruption. Meanwhile, Yelena attended the final summit session as if nothing had changed. She wore pale blue, understated. The tattoo had dimmed again, almost faded. During closing statements, she rose. "Earth is grateful," she said, "for the hospitality extended. We understand fear. We understand control. And we understand the power of being underestimated. We've practiced it for centuries." She paused, looking at each of them. "You feared our war machines. But you should have feared our grandmothers. They never lose." With that, she bowed and exited the council chamber. In her private shuttle, as the engines warmed, Halloran stood at her side. "We received the message from High Command," he said. "They're initiating Protocol Ivy. You're clear to activate." She looked out the viewport, where the garden domes shimmered in the growing dark. "Not yet," she murmured. "Let the myths simmer." He hesitated. "And if they retaliate?" "They won't," she said. "They'll hide. Pretend they never tried to break us. Rewrite the story so they were wise to let us go." He nodded. As the shuttle lifted, the station seemed smaller than before, quieter. In her seat, Yelena traced a fingertip along the edge of her tattoo. Not a weapon. Not entirely. A signature. A story carved in flesh. And somewhere, far across the stars, other tattoos began to pulse in time. It began with a ripple across star charts. Quiet shifts in travel routes. Canceled trade convoys. A growing silence around Earth's border systems. No declarations. No accusations. Just retreat. Some said it was coincidence. Others felt it in their bones, that subtle, electric stillness before a storm breaks open. In the halls of Samitra, the aftermath of Yelena Gray's departure settled like ash after fire. The council issued no formal statement. No recordings of her final words were released. Delegates who had mocked her now spoke her name with the same reverence they once reserved for extinct gods. Rickthal kept his silence. He withdrew from public view, citing health, though his voice was still heard on encrypted channels, whispering behind closed doors. "She was sent to warn us," he told one confidant. "And we didn't listen." Yelena's shuttle didn't return to Earth immediately. It made calculated stops, quiet meetings with small factions, fringe colonies, forgotten outposts. She walked through border stations, as if drawn by memory more than mission. Everywhere she went, people seemed to straighten their posture, speak in softer tones, remember things they thought lost. At one such station, a child approached her in the docking bay. No older than 10, half fused with artificial limbs, eyes flickering from exposure to forbidden tech. "Are you the witch?" the child asked. Yelena knelt, eye to eye. "I'm just an old woman with a long memory." The child nodded, unsatisfied. "My father said you have a house with legs." She smiled. "Not anymore. I fly now. He handed her a crumpled drawing. It was crude but clear, her tattoo, rendered in shaky charcoal lines. Beneath it, a single word written in Terran script, still. She folded it carefully, tucked it into her sleeve. Keep drawing, she said. We need better stories. She left that station with a gift. Silence. The kind that spread. Back in the heart of the Galactic Council, factions scrambled to recover control. Official doctrine was redrawn in long, nervous lines. Earth was no longer emergent. Earth was now unpredictable. Worse, Earth was respected. And respect, in the political lexicon of empire, was just a mask worn by fear. Earth didn't send threats. It sent reminders. Yelena arrived on Kernus 3, the site of a massive upcoming summit between core world civilizations. Security was doubled, then tripled. Her invitation had not been extended. Yet when her ship entered orbit, no one moved to deny her. Atmo clearance was granted without a word. She landed in silence, walked alone through the sun-drenched plaza toward the high marble steps. She wore no cloak, no weapons, just that black dress with the hidden stitching and the tattoo that now shimmered faintly even in daylight. 2 guards moved to intercept her. One of them froze mid-step, eyes wide. She's already inside, he whispered. His partner frowned. What? She's been here before. They both stepped aside, without a word. Inside, the summit was already underway. Voices clashed in cautious tones. Old enemies shook hands with too much force. A new alliance was forming, one built entirely around mutual distrust of Earth's intentions. They called it the Interstellar Shield, a symbolic gesture meant to appear strong. The doors opened. Yelena entered like fog. Conversations halted. Breathing changed. The speaker paused mid-sentence. No one had expected her, and yet everyone had prepared for this moment as if they had. She walked slowly, stopping beside a delegation of diplomats from the Axri, the Lurani, the Galthrith. I like this hall, she said softly. It echoes well. Rickthal was not present, but his aide stood. You are not registered to speak. Yelena gave him a long look, full of sad familiarity. I'm not here to speak. I'm here to finish. From the shadows, near the high balconies, Halloran emerged. He wore no badge, no rank, just a single blue ribbon on his wrist, a Terran funerary symbol worn backward. He nodded once. Yelena reached up and touched her tattoo. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then the light dimmed, not from any physical failure, but from perception itself. The room became softer, weightless. Delegates felt their hearts skip. Their minds flickered with memory. Old dreams returned. Childhood fears. Stories whispered in ancient tongues. A song someone had once sung to them as they died, though they had never died before. The tattoo pulsed. Yelena's voice filled the chamber, but her mouth did not move. This is not an attack. This is a mirror. Each delegate saw themselves, not as they were now, but as they had been at their most afraid. Alone, defenseless, before technology, before alliance, before translation devices made their speech easy and their meanings false. You tried to define us by what we lacked, her voice continued. No claws, no armor, no hive. But humans do not fight for territory. We fight for narrative, for memory. We do not conquer worlds. We haunt them. The Samari delegate stood, hands trembling. What is this? What are you doing? I am finishing the story, Yelena said. Behind her, screens lit up. Not footage, not data, art. Human hands had drawn each frame. Earth's great wars, Earth's small kindnesses, faces caught in grief, in joy, in rage, moments of sublime horror, moments of impossible grace. A galaxy's worth of experience painted in color and shadow. Then came images of the other worlds. Their atrocities, their denials, their sanitized history. You believed we were the threat, Yelena said. But we were the record keepers. And now we are the authors. A Lurani delegate stumbled forward. This is psychological warfare. You are rewriting perception. Yes, she said, because perception was your weapon. We merely refined it. Halloran moved to a panel, entered a sequence. Across the summit chamber, devices activated in each seat, non-invasive neural induction receivers. They did not harm. They only revealed. Suddenly, every alien present saw the same vision. A planet, once scorched, now green. A people, broken, now singing. And over them, a figure carved into the rock. Not Yelena, not any known human. Just a woman, a grandmother, a witch. She held a broom in one hand, a book in the other. And across her throat, the mark, the tattoo. Earth is not here to dominate, Yelena said. We are here to remind you that empires fall, that stories remain. And we have made ourselves into a story you cannot erase. One delegate tried to leave. The door would not open. Not locked, just unresponsive. Yelena walked down the central aisle. You feared war. But war is crude. You feared spies. But we are obvious. You feared technology. But we use spoons and silence. What you should have feared was grief. She stopped. And we are the galaxy's most enduring mourners. She took the center stage. Her tattoo gleamed. I am Baba Yaga. I am grandmother to forgotten truths. I am the house that walks through fire. I do not kill. I do not beg. I do not explain. I remember, and I teach others how. The light returned. The screens went dark. Silence fell. And then one by one, every delegate stood. Not to applaud, not to resist, but to bear witness. Later, no one could describe what had changed. The files recorded nothing unusual. The instruments reported no attack. But every soul who stood in that chamber walked away, altered. In the days that followed, new policies were quietly drafted. Not out of fear, not directly, but from something deeper. Reverence, respect, shame. Earth was not challenged again. Back aboard her ship, Yelena sat in quiet reflection. Halloran poured tea. You set the trap a long time ago, he said. No, she replied. They did, when they taught us to listen. They'll write songs about this. They already have. She looked out at the stars. Now, she said, they'll learn to sing them in their own tongue. As the ship turned toward home, her tattoo dimmed for the first time in days. It had spoken. It had been heard. And somewhere in a garden far from the summit, a child drew a picture of a house with legs, and a woman who carried stars in her voice. No one mocked the witch again, not because she had conquered them, but because they knew, finally, that she had been right there at the edge of the woods all along, waiting for them to knock.